you. Thank you. Good morning. We all know them. They live in our homes, they sit in our classes, they may work beside us in the office. They text using one-letter words. Even OK is now just K. They post minute-by-minute updates on Facebook. And they wear headsets to play video games with their friends remotely. They're digital natives. Mark Prensky is an educational game developer out of the US who coined the term digital native back in 2001. To Prensky, a digital native is a native speaker of the digital language of computers, the internet, and video games. The media have embraced this term. They love the sensationalist, catchy, common sense appeal of it. And employers can't wait to get their hands on these digital natives. They're going to transform the workplace. They are going to mentor senior employees. They're going to take over social media duties. In an industry survey that we did last year, we asked public relations practitioners, what do young people need to know graduating with social media skills? What do they need to know? Know more than me and be more active than me. It's a safe bet. Any student or intern grew up with it. Educators are grappling with this notion of the digital native. We've got folks that are doing a tremendous job in their classes teaching digital media literacy skills, but we also have educators who have bought in to the digital native rhetoric. They are convinced that these young people are learning it all at home, so what do they have to teach them for? Now, if you see yourself in this photo, you may be a parent, an educator, or an employer of digital natives. You are a digital immigrant. Now, you know you're a digital immigrant if your birthday predates the cell phone. You know you're a digital immigrant if you didn't even know there was a new Facebook. You know you're a digital immigrant if you use a salutation in your text messages. And if you're like me, you know you're a digital immigrant because you have 32 friends on Facebook. So you can imagine my terror in the fall of 2009 when I was asked to embark on a new adventure. Teach the first social media course in Humber's public relations program. A digital immigrant teaching digital natives in their own space. OMG. I was convinced I was setting myself up for what I would call an epic fail. So my colleague and I started to build the course outline, and we made a bunch of assumptions about our students. They're digital natives. They know the tools. They're going to be teaching us. What do we have to teach them? So here's what happened on our first day. I walked into class and I asked my students, how many of you are on Facebook, on Twitter? How many of you blog? Here's what I learned. Almost everyone was on Facebook, no surprise. 5 out of 35 students were tweeting. 5 out of 35 students were blogging. When I informed them that in the course of our classes, we would be tweeting about our guest speakers, we would be blogging about things that were going on in class or things that they were learning about the workplace, and we were going to post those into a public space. There was a tension in the room. And I realized why. Asking students to blog and tweet in a public space is the equivalent of teaching a broadcast journalism course and asking them to go down to the CBC studios every week and broadcast live across the country. Understandably scary. So this all started to intrigue me, and I wanted to do some research. I really wanted to find out a little bit more about students' ideas about public and private spaces. So I received a research grant from Humber, and I studied 130 certificate and diploma students. I called my study Stop Creeping on Me. And let me just explain. Certificate students are on average about 4 years older than diploma students and have a university degree. Here's what I found out about Facebook habits. I asked them, what are you doing on Facebook? And they said, 90% of them said, we do set privacy settings. We are watching who's following us. 87% said they use their full name. And 77% said they use their full identity, no sunglasses, no hats. I then asked how many students share photos and who do they share them with online. More certificate students shared photos with family and friends only. Diploma students were kind of divided, family and friends and anyone. Then I asked them, think about a time when you questioned whether to post a photo. Something gave you pause. So this is what a few of them said. Pictures from the bar intoxicated, didn't post for fear of an employer seeing it. If it's something I wouldn't want my mother to see, I don't post it. So they didn't share these photos with me, so I had to use my imagination. So this is what I thought. This is probably a good thing that they're using some judgment. I think students today are very aware of the resilience of online materials. And I think it's a good thing they are because employers and college and university admissions officers are out there looking for this kind of thing in order to make judgments on whether to hire or whether to admit. So it was good to know that young people were aware that there's a different way to behave in a public and in a private space. So I asked a few more questions. I said, is Facebook a public or a private space? More certificate than diploma students agreed that it was private. And I followed this question up with, LinkedIn, is LinkedIn a public or a private space? All certificate students agreed it was public. Diploma students were torn. Public, private, maybe both. What's surprising is those of us who know how to use LinkedIn, it's all about business networking. The whole point of it is to be out there and get contacts. So it surprised me that they were a little bit torn about how to use this tool. And so I realized, through the course of my research, I came across a really great article, academic journal article by Gregor Kennedy et al. Out of the University of Melbourne. And this article introduced me to the concepts of living technologies and learning technologies. And the way I interpret living technologies is these are the things we do every day. We text, we post on Facebook, but learning technologies require a few more literacies. They're the things that might, they're a little higher level, like collaborating on a wiki or developing a website. And what I realized from my research is that not everybody has equal digital literacy skills, so I thought, does that mean that everyone's not really equally a digital native? And so I continued my research and I asked the question of the students I was surveying, are you a digital native? 78% agreed or strongly agreed that they were. What's interesting about this is that this was their initial response, but I offered them an opportunity to comment. 43 out of 59 respondents offered a comment. And what you'll notice is that most of the comments include the word but. I would agree, but kids now are more digital natives than I am. The term applies to me, but it is difficult to slot everyone my age into that box. A few more buts. I'm a digital native, but that's because my parents are particular early adopters of technology. I am a digital native, but I'm pretty tech savvy. I'm a digital native, but I'm in communications. A lot of my friends in other programs don't do this stuff. So I started to realize that digital natives might have living technologies. Examples of living technologies to me are, their ability to plan a party on Facebook. The phone never rings. Their ability to text behind their back. Just learned about that one. And, the ability to get a high level on Call of Duty. Now, these are spectacular skills, I agree, but they're not necessarily valued in the workplace, and that's the challenge today's digital natives are facing. So I would suggest to you that digital natives don't necessarily have the learning technologies. And here's how I'd like to relate that. Nurses aren't born knowing how to administer a needle. They're taught. Engineers aren't born knowing how to build bridges. They are taught. Chefs aren't born knowing how to cook. They too are taught. And in this same way, today's digital natives are not born speaking the language of learning technologies. They need to be taught, and they need to be taught by the people in their lives, their teachers, their parents, and their employers, so that they can navigate these spaces. Some educators are already tackling this challenge, and they are teaching digital media literacies, a variety of them. And a couple of literacies that come up over and over again, a few things that they point out: knowing how to search information, knowing how to assess its relevancy, knowing how to identify bias, and something that's really important, knowing how to evaluate sources. So for example, if you want to find a recipe, it's probably a good idea to trust Martha Stewart, maybe not Martha from Moose Jaw. Now, I believe that this idea of learning technologies can be transferred to the workplace. And many employers are telling us that young people's digital literacy skills need to be reframed for that new place. Another quote from the survey that we did last year, again, a PR practitioner that responded to us. What do young people need to do? Completely switch off their personal habits and see everything in a professional way. What does professional mean to the industry? Perhaps things like knowing how to blog in a corporate voice, knowing how to set up a Facebook page for a client. These are the kinds of skills young people are going to have to learn. Now, David Jones is a senior public relations practitioner here in Toronto, and last year he did a presentation about who should be on your corporate social media team. What he stressed was they should be seasoned PR practitioners. They should be people who know how to communicate and who know the industry. They shouldn't be this guy, okay? The intern is not the guy that should be leading the way in terms of social media in the business world. Not yet. They need to be taught. Educators and employers are starting to work on literacies, but we as parents need to think about this too. It's one thing for your kid to be on Foursquare, check in at Starbucks and get a free latte. It's another thing for them to be mayor of their own house, okay? That level of disclosure in a geolocating site leaves them vulnerable. We as parents need to understand this and need to educate accordingly. Now, I've talked to you a lot about public relations students, and we have to keep a few things in mind. These folks are natural communicators. These are people who are drawn to the technologies and are getting very savvy in this. What I ask you to do is think about your own kids, your own students, your own employees. How do they fare in social media? Do they know more than just the living technologies? I think that we need to move away from this idea of the digital native and the digital immigrants. And rather, let's work together to ensure that we are all digitally literate. And I think that would result in an epic win. Thank you.